Hi, folks. Welcome back to Sparkle on Substack with me, Claire Venus. It is so nice to be here with Nicola. We are going to talk things Substack, Instagram, and creative expression for authors today. I'm so excited to get into the conversation. Hi, Nicola.
Hello, Claire. Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. How are you?
I'm all right, actually. Yeah, I'm not enjoying the turn in the weather, but other than that, I'm good.
Oh, and she's on brand today with a green jumper. Look at
I
that. I've
know.
gone like
I was just
slightly
noticing that.
sparkly festive and you're sparkle green. It's lush. Nicola, for people that haven't come across your work yet, could you tell them a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I am an Instagram educator and strategist for writers and authors. I started working with writers and authors about 2 years ago now. I had like this mad epiphany out on a dog walk where I suddenly realized that I was having to find some more small business clients because previously I used to work as a social media manager for small businesses. And I also write. So I have a writers group who I'd been unofficially supporting with their social media efforts when they were having their books published. And I suddenly had this epiphany out on a dog walk that said, why don't you bring your two worlds closer together? Why don't you do what you're doing for your friends, like as part of your work, your business? So for the last 2 years, I've been working with writers and authors at different stages in their publication journey, different genres, different spaces. And I just teach writers and authors how they can use Instagram primarily, although a lot of what I talk about does cross platform, to find their readers and market their books. And it is the biggest joy. Like writers and authors are just the best people to work with. So it's really reawakened the love I have for my work.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, and there's such creative expression in all of that as well, isn't there? I think one of the
Mm,
things that we can all feel, and I have felt about Instagram, is it's not working. Like, I
mm,
feel like I'm trying, but it's not working. And actually, because I've listened to your podcast episodes and I've read a lot of your articles, I love your approach because you are excited about it, but you're also very practical. You're like, this is how we're going to make it work. This is how we're going to
mm.
make it feel good. And I love your approach with it all. I just think it really resonates and it helps because you break things down into kind of bite-sized actions and you show demos of how to do things as well and ideas. So yeah, I'm really grateful you exist.
No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's been the feedback from a lot of people sort of saying, "Oh, thank God," because it does feel so overwhelming. And I think that, if we look back to Instagram of the sort of 2010s when it first evolved, it was a very different place and it is so noisy and so overwhelming now. And then on top of that, a lot of writers and authors are quite introverted people, so they're sort of thinking, how can I do this? Like, not only are there all these confusing buttons and levers to push and pull, but also I, as a person, don't really know how I can show up online in a way that feels authentic to me. So a lot of my work is kind of a sort of a mixture of the sort of practical, in the weeds, day to day tactics and tips that people can just sort of be applying very, very practically, but also kind of taking a more holistic view of it and thinking about who are you as a writer, as an individual, what are your passions, what are your interests, how can you use these platforms in a way that feels good to you, rather than the dominant narrative of social media, which I think is what lots of us have in our minds when we think about how we use social media, which is the kind of like influencer approach of sharing the nuts and bolts of your life and, perhaps sometimes like oversharing some of that. And that can make lots of writers and authors feel quite afraid. And also like the aesthetic of how you have to show up, like what you have to look like and what your posts have to look like. So all of this feeds into this kind of like cocktail of obstacles and barriers that authors and writers very often feel about showing up online to find their readers. And so and the work I do helps people overcome a lot of those obstacles and barriers in a way that feels authentic to them. That's the fundamental, that underpins basically everything I do, is that it has to feel like you.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like there's something with me because I was building on Instagram before I arrived to Substack, but with Substack, it just felt like a breath of fresh air in terms of it was a blank page. And I think when I went on Instagram, I saw so much stuff before
Mm,
that I then was like, where is my voice in any of this? What is relevant? What is there I've got to say? And then when I did post, and there was such a mix of people on there, from like friends and family to people I'd worked with to people I didn't know who they were or what they were doing, that like it was
yeah,
really difficult for me. Even though I've got a background in audience development for festivals and events, it was just really tricky to understand what my relationship was. And I think
yeah,
because it is a bit of a mirror, and you're like, okay, so I'm posting a photo of me, or I'm posting a time lapse of me, and then what am I saying over the top of that? So I think it's one of those weird things. Once you've cracked it, you've cracked it. But the
mm,
way into it can just feel very discombobulating. And I know lots of people just give up and just go, oh,
yeah.
it's just not for me. I'm not on there.
And for a lot of writers and authors, they don't really, they have hang-ups. I don't, that's probably not the
Mhm.
best word for it,
No, I get
about
it. Yeah.
identifying as a writer and author. So they're almost like stepping into this new identity and
Mm,
being asked to do that very publicly,
mm,
and start to use these platforms, because it is an expectation now that authors and writers do an awful lot of their marketing for themselves, even if they
yeah.
are traditionally published. Like obviously for self-published authors, it's all on your shoulders. But
Hmm.
even for traditionally published authors, many of them will find that they are expected to do a lot. So they are having to grapple with stepping into this whole new identity, doing that publicly, while also like learning that, like I said, the ins and outs of these platforms. And I just think that it's just a lot. It's a lot to get your head around. Yeah, and so I always, that's where I always start from with people, is sort of saying, well, look, like this is big, this is a lot. Let's
Mm.
not sort of downplay this and pretend that this isn't a big deal. It really is. But there are ways through it, and there are different ways of using these platforms that can work just as well for you as a writer as they do for other people in other niches.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when someone's got like a physical book, it's hard, isn't
Mm.
it? Because it's like, well, it's the book. Like, there's only a few things to say. It's the book.
Yeah,
It's the book.
yeah.
And it's like, oh no, because you can talk about the backstory, you can talk about
Mm-hmm.
the timeline of getting to be published. Like, there's so much in it all, isn't there? And then the writing process and practice. I find like people will ask me a lot, like, what's a day in the life like? People love that sort of stuff. And I used to do these interviews when I worked at the theatre that were called that, a day in the life of, and then it would be whichever
Yeah.
company was there for that week at the Presenting House Theatre that I worked at. I would interview the cast, and then the audience would come in and like they would have different questions. But everybody's fascinated with what a day in the life's like, what the
I
timeline's been
think
like how you came to come up with the idea of the book. There's so much in there, isn't there, when you break it all down?
I just think it's just such a human trait, like to
Mm,
be curious about one
yeah.
another, to be curious about one another's lives. And I think sometimes we can assume that to show up online, whether it's on Substack or whether it's on Instagram or anywhere else, is to show up in like a new and different way to how we show up in the world. And actually, there is no special way to show up on online. It is literally just an extension of what you would be talking about anyway, what your interests are anyway. And of course, as writers and most creatives, we're writing about the things we care about anyway. So if you're posting about the things that you care about, you're also writing about the things that you care about. Even if you're writing fiction, there will be themes and issues that pop up in your fiction that
Mm,
you just more generally care about.
yeah.
And therefore, if you're posting about those things as well, then you're already aligned with your books,
Mm,
with what is essentially your product that you ultimately will be trying to sell, which is your book. But if you're posting about those passions and interests that also pop up in your book, you don't have to do anything that's special or unusual for
mm,
your content to just automatically end up being aligned with your book. And therefore, the people who are interested in those posts where you are sharing the behind the scenes or the origin story of your writing, or if you're a nonfiction writer, there may be expertise that you are sharing, then those people who are interested in those things just will automatically be interested in your book.
mm,
So there is often this, I think, this thought that you've got to be coming up with something new to talk about online if you're going to show up and market your book. And it's always like, well, no, let's dig into the things that you're already passionate about, that you're already interested in, that you are already writing about. And then it's a case of packaging it up in the right kind of way for social media. You know, there are tactics that go along with each of these platforms that are slightly different on each of them. But as long as you have that foundation of, I am interested in these things, I am going to post about these things because they're also what I write about, then the tactics is relatively easy to get to grips with. I often describe it as learning to drive. At first it's
Mm.
completely overwhelming, but like once you've done it enough times, it becomes second nature.
Mm.
So, if you sort of like have those foundations in the back of your mind at all times, and you use those to underpin everything that you do, and then you layer in the tactics on top, I just think that is a much more natural approach and sustainable approach for writers and authors and other creatives as well.
Yeah, I think it's been also really nice for me recently to experiment with trial reels. I don't know whether
Mm.
you use those as well, or you've got, not everybody's got the functionality, have they? I don't quite know how it all works, but
Yeah.
it's been lovely for me to think about the new people, because I think sometimes it can be like I mentioned, there's a mix of different people that, and also you would want Instagram to show your content to new people as well.
Mm.
Whereas with trial reels, it's all new people. So
Hmm.
that kind of trying to grab attention and bringing people into your world has actually felt quite liberating, to just be
Mm.
experimental and try different things. And sometimes I will give them a gentle edit and share them back out to my main audience as well. But a lot of times I just use them as an experiment to see which piece of content performs better, if any resonate, if any followers come over, all that sort of thing. And it has felt, for the first time, like, yeah, it's super liberating, like, oh, I can do anything. But I think probably that was a mindset that I could have had earlier on. I just didn't, because there was so many people there that I knew, and I was like, oh, this is difficult. Like, how
Yeah.
can I run myself through all the filters of all these people? You can't, can you? Like, you have to
No.
feel comfortable enough to be like, I'm going to do what I want to do for my ideal people. And in this case, it would be readers, people that are going to buy the book. But ultimately, people can stay or go, can't they? They can
Mm.
fall away or they can come back
Yeah.
together. Mm.
So there's so much in what you've just said. I think that the idea um, that you set the agenda is quite often a big idea for people to step into. So you have the ability, you have the power to decide what is the purpose of my Instagram account. And if the purpose of your Instagram account is to stay in touch with family and friends who live miles away, and you want to share photos of your family, that's absolutely fine. And so you post accordingly. But if the main purpose of your Instagram account is that you want to find new readers for your book, then that is also completely legitimate. Now, some people in your life may have feelings about this, and they are entitled to have their feelings about that. And it can be a difficult line to tread where you're sort of trying to please more than one group of people, or you are fearful of what people may think of you as you step into this new identity as a writer online. And so, I mean, trial reels specifically can be a really great way of sort of circumventing those issues, because you can be trying to reach new people without your original audience knowing anything about it. But more generally, I usually encourage people to think of every single post as having a slightly different purpose anyway. And this is an approach I've had for years, but actually it's an approach that's been strengthened by the changes that Instagram has made and continues to make with the algorithms, where so much of our feeds now are algorithmically determined, where the robots basically use our previous activity to decide what we're going to see. Now, that might be that we see posts from accounts that we follow, that we regularly interact with, therefore the algorithms understand to show us posts from those accounts. Or it could be that we are regularly interacting with posts about a particular subject, therefore the algorithms understand to show us more of that content, even if the accounts that content is coming from are not accounts that we already follow. So that's why we get this mixture of content in our feeds. And so when we set out to post anything to our Instagram account, it's important to sort of think about, okay, well, how is user behavior, our audience's behavior, going to influence how many people see this post? But also, how is the algorithm's behavior going to influence how many people see this post? And so I very often think of my posts as having certainly two different purposes, maybe more, but it does vary from person to person. And those might be to engage. One purpose might be to engage with our existing audience. So those are posts that are designed for people who are already familiar with what we do, where we are trying to involve them, bring them along on the journey with us, or engage them in conversations. The sort of deeper, more conversation-based posts versus posts that are there to introduce us, to make us seem credible, whether that's through showing our expertise, showing what we know, or by recognizing the problems that our audience might be experiencing. And so we appeal to new audiences by sharing content that is kind of introducing us. So I think of Instagram content as having these two different purposes, and very often the kind of engagement you get on those two different kinds of posts will look very different, which is why it's then becomes important to think, okay, well, if this post is to introduce me to new audiences, does it really matter if I have very many comments on it? No, it doesn't, because that's not the purpose of that post. Whereas if you've created another post that the purpose of that post is to generate conversation, does it really matter whether that post has very many views on it? No, it doesn't, because what I'm looking for is the number of comments, is the conversation that I'm getting back from my existing audience. So we can start to get much more strategic in the way that we view our own content, and the way we think about success on the platform, based on what is it that we want from the platform. Do we want new audiences? Do we want an engaged community? Do we want a mixture of both? And that again can then help make it feel more sustainable, because we can not get bogged down in feeling like we're being rejected when actually we've created a piece of content that's to reach new people, rather than a piece of content that's there to drive engagement with our existing audiences. So there is so much that we can do to sort of safeguard ourselves against those awkward feelings, and to make sure that we are clear about what it is that we want Instagram to do for us, and that I think can make it much more sustainable, so that we can keep showing up and not feel rubbish about it, basically.
I love all of that. There's so much in there, and I know everyone listening will just be nodding along, being like, "Oh, such a permission slip, so gorgeous." What's been really interesting for me, and I have learned from many different Instagram teachers over the years, it's been really insightful and interesting, is that for me, Instagram is definitely my shop window. So when we think about the know, like, and trust factor, for me, it is bringing up all of that in people that come along. Sometimes people will voice note me straight away, and then they'll want to join the membership, or they'll want to know what other offers and classes and stuff that I've got. But more often than not, they're just following along, and they're following
Mm,
along for a while until they feel like they need
yeah.
something. It's been quite tricky for me to speak about Substack on Instagram, because it's my understanding from what I've heard that it is like muted or hidden as a word. So if you go and try and sort of say, come along to my Substack, or if you share any of the assets, obviously it says Substack in there, so the views are low. But I'm quite experimental about the things that I try. Like I love going on stories, and having a bit of a chat on my dog walk. I've heard about people saying, don't post for 24 hours, let your stories expire, and then
Mm,
post something, try and get engagement. And it was really curious the other week, because I'd received an early copy of Amy McNee's new book, To Kill a Queen, which is a beautiful read. Really, really enjoyed it. It took me in all sorts of different directions I wasn't expecting. And I wanted to give Amy a shout out before publication day, which was the next day. So I don't usually go on a Sunday, but I was like, okay, I'll just go on. I'll post a photograph of the book, tag Amy in, and then we'll leave it at that. I went back later that day, and this was only one story. Usually my stories are anywhere between 60, like max about 100 views. This one was over 300 views. I was like, whoa, what's happened? You know, like that sort of slot
Yeah.
machine feeling, like, oh, I've done, I've done something. I'm not quite sure what I've done, but I don't know whether it's because Amy's got a bigger platform and then she liked it and messaged me. Um,
Mm.
she didn't share it because she was promoting something else up until the day of publication, but it didn't matter. I just did it as like a shout out because I felt so grateful that she'd sent me a copy. But it was just like, oh, I've done something with the robots and made them really happy, and it just made me laugh. It was so funny.
The robots are sometimes a bit of a mystery. I mean,
Mystery robots.
just mystery robots. They sort of float around, controlling everything.
Yeah.
Um, Adam Mosseri, who is the head of Instagram, recently posted a video on the Instagram on his feed. He very often does these really helpful explainer videos. I mean, they're great for a geek like me. If you're if
Yeah,
you're
no, I
just
think
sort
he
of
does
there,
really well because there's so much
yeah,
misinformation. And
yeah, they're
also, there's
really
so
good.
many teachers that
Yeah,
oppose what each other are saying. So I like it
yeah.
when he does a video. Yeah, it's
I think
good.
they're great. But he did recently post one that talked about this weird thing that was happening with stories that he said was completely unintentional, where if you only posted one story, you got this huge bump in views. And if you posted more stories, then it suppressed the reach of your stories. And he said it was a completely unintended thing and they'd fixed it. Now,
Oh,
I
sad.
don't know if they
I would
had
like it
fixed
if they just
it.
left it because I would do it more.
Yeah. So I don't know if they have fixed it or
Mm.
not, but
Mhm.
stories have their own algorithm.
Yeah.
So, they are not they are the only content space on Instagram that when you go into your stories at the top of your account, you will only see content from um accounts that you follow. You'll see ads as well, I should say that, but you will only see content from accounts that you follow. So I always think that when people say, "Oh, I really miss the old days when it was like a
Mm.
chronological feed," and da-da-da, I'm like, "Well, stories is about as close as you're going to get to that." So if you really are wanting to see the accounts that you follow, go and watch your stories because that is
Mm.
where you will find your people.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that any kind of interaction on your stories will bump them to the front of the stories feed. That stories feed at the top of your account is tiny. There's only space
Mm.
for 3 accounts at any one time.
Mm.
So if anybody shares your story or interacts with it or DMs you off the back of it, so like Amy will have done, then
Yeah.
that will be a signal to the stories algorithm. Oh, this story is of interest. So let me bump it to the front of more people's stories algorithm. And therefore more people are more likely to see it. But of course, there is also a question of timing, which might be simply that on a Sunday, people are sort of lazing around and perhaps have just sort of gone into stories
Mm.
and may not normally do that on any other day of the week. And therefore, they end up watching your story on that particular day, which gives it this bump.
Mm.
But it's all like there's so much smoke and mirrors and trying to figure it out. Like there are hard and fast rules, but not very many,
And it's
annoyingly.
leaning into the surprise of it. Like I love a
Yeah,
surprise. I love a visual
yeah.
surprise. I just love a
Oh,
surprise. Like I'm really into surprises. And so when I get a
yeah,
surprise like that, I'm like, oh, that
yeah,
was fun. Like I
yeah.
wouldn't be frustrated if that didn't happen because for me it feels so random and has felt so random over all the years I've been on there. Like I remember there was a time and I used to talk to stories quite a lot and I would just go on, quite
Mhm.
raw from a thing that might have happened. Like I wasn't one of these people that would cry on stories, but like I would share authentically what had happened. And I was holding my daughter, I think maybe she was about 3 months or something. And I bumped into someone in the village who asked if I was pregnant. And I was devastated, like, because I was holding my 3-month-old daughter. And to
But
me, I was just like, wait, what? Like, no, like, what? No, like, no. But like in her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was trying to congratulate me because her generation probably might have had children closer together. And I was there just completely broken, sleep deprived, obviously carrying postpartum weight that she wasn't used to seeing me with. And I spoke to stories about it, and this was another time where everybody flooded in, and I was like, oh God, so it was one of those really interesting experiments with my audience because for me, I was just venting a bit because obviously she's not
Yeah.
on there. And it was like, it's a safe space to kind of talk about this and sort of say again, like, do we not just get a break? Like, can we as women just have a break from people
Yeah.
commenting on our appearance one way or the other? You know, when is that coming? And people just flooded my inbox
Yeah.
with like voice notes and messages and like solidarity and all that gorgeous stuff. But it became so overwhelming. I was like, oh, I can't
Yeah.
have any more conversations about it. I kind of just wanted a couple of conversations about it, and then it would have been
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm done
All or
now. But it's
nothing.
like, no, this like ferocious energy came in. So there's things like that as well, which I always find like really interesting. You know, you're never quite sure which topic or how you articulate something or what you show somebody and where it's going to resonate.
Mm.
I love all of that. And I love the instant nature of it, the visual
Yeah.
nature of it. I think there's so much that we can be playful and creative with. And since I've come back to it with a creative mindset rather than a business mindset, that's given me a lot of freedom, yes, but it's also kind of released the shackles. Like it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be anything. It doesn't have to be lead generation. Like it's creative self-expression and people will discover me and find me. And I know that. I don't need to have a massive account.
And
And I don't know that I want to manage a massive account on there, you
no,
know?
I think it definitely comes with significant downsides. And
Mm.
like having engagement on a story or on a post that feels completely overwhelming and quite dysregulating, so you're sort of like thinking, I now feel completely frazzled, but then also simultaneously feel responsible for all
And
these people who
yeah, to
maybe
respond
telling
to
me
them.
their own stories, or
Mhm.
so sometimes I do, I think it is a double-edged sword for definite. And I love what you just said there about approaching it with a creative mindset. And I quite often talk about with clients, I quite often talk about the importance of allowing yourself space to experiment, not expecting yourself to nail everything, even never mind all of the time, even some of the time. There will be things that land, there will be things that don't land. That doesn't mean the things that don't land are not of value. It very often is the packaging that hasn't worked. It's nothing to do with the idea, because there are particular tricks that you can use to package up your ideas on Instagram just because of the way that we use the platform collectively. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the idea. But having an experimental mindset where you think, okay, well, like any good experiment, something will fail, and taking that as data and then trying to figure out why has it failed and what could I change that's not to do with the quality of the idea, but maybe the quality of the packaging. And then using that kind of like experimental mindset as sort of ballast against the impact that these platforms can have on our on our feelings of self-worth and self-esteem, where we sort of say, well, no, well, like I'm here to experiment. I'm here to use these platforms to try to reach my readers as much as possible. And anybody that this post does reach, who likes it, then I've done my job. I've reached somebody. I've connected with somebody. They have responded in some way, and therefore it has done its job. And releasing ourselves from, I don't know, kind of trying to play the algorithms games in terms of going viral and things like that, which very often people want to do because they think it's a silver bullet for their book marketing or their audience
Mm.
building. Oh, if I can just go viral, I won't have to do very much. It'll sell X number of books, and I won't have to do this thing that I don't like anymore. But actually, it can bring its own problems. It can bring its own challenges to your sense of peace and your nervous system. And if the piece of content that goes viral is not very well aligned to what you actually do, it can actually bring you the wrong attention that's completely irrelevant to your book. So I often talk about how I used to run a personal account that I grew over a number of years up to sort of about 25K. I don't post on it anymore. It is still out there, but I don't post on it anymore. And I used to find it, I realized, really sort of stressful when I occasionally had posts go viral, and I used to find it so stressful because I
Mm.
felt like I don't know who these people are. I
Mm.
don't know what energy they're bringing to my account. And even though there was 25,000 people on that account and I didn't know all of them by any stretch of the imagination, just this feeling of having new people arriving in my space, my little corner of the internet, was not a pleasant feeling, actually. So I think sometimes, like, going viral or having a huge account and brings its own pressures that we can overlook and think that that's going to solve all of our problems, when in fact it really doesn't. And actually, like, approaching it rather than, I want to go viral, how can I go viral? Approaching it from a point of view as, I want to connect with more potential readers over things that we all care about. How can I experiment to see what will make that happen, what will make me able to connect with people, is a much healthier and sustainable approach. Similar, and like, for example, the story that you just you just told, of sharing a moment from your day that, because of who your audience are and who the target audience for your business is as well, lots of your target audience would relate to. So it's nothing to do with your business, but you are sharing a moment from your day to day that says, I am like you, we are like one another. And just that human connection then makes that whole trust, the trust part, much stronger, that connection much stronger, which then makes it easier for people to trust you when you start to talk about your expertise or your area of business. So all these things are really interconnected in the approach that I take to Instagram. Like, I'm not somebody who says, right, I'm going to prescribe that this many reels that look like this, and you've got to use these exact hooks. That's not my approach at all. It is very much individualized to play to your story, your background, your passions, your interests, and then align those with the marketing for your book as well.
Beautiful. Yeah. I feel like we need to circle into Substack because we're both on there.
Yeah.
You have a beautiful presence, you have your membership, don't you? The Too Much Social membership for
Yeah.
authors who use Instagram inside of Substack. So that's beautiful. And I want to talk a little bit about process. So when I might do this on stories. So I might come up with an idea and I might test it out on stories. But now, more often than not, I've got such courage in my ideas that I'll write them out long form first, and
Yeah.
then I'll end up sharing them back to Substack once they're published, or I might share a bit of a preview but to Instagram, sorry, after they're published, or I might share a bit of a preview. I'd love to hear more about your approach with how you balance the two spaces. And
Mhm.
I've written an article for you, haven't I, for your
Yeah.
Substack that'll go out that kind of
Middle
says
of
more
December.
about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got that there, and I'd love to know from you how you are balancing these two spaces. So whether that's
Mm.
about how much you're showing up or the process of how you come up with an idea and how you understand how it's going to fit, and then what is open access and what is
Mm.
behind the paywall. I think people would be really interested in that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a funny one because it's in a constant state of flux and evolution, which I enjoy. I don't like things to be sort of very fixed and rigid. As is my Instagram content, like at the moment, things that are working really well on Instagram are like personal stories where you kind of teach a lesson via your personal experience. So rather than people feeling like you're giving them homework, they feel like they're learning from something that you've experienced yourself. And that's doing really well on Instagram at the moment. And actually, that's an energy that I want to bring to my Substack a little bit more. At the moment, the way I organize things is my Substack, I have I've got several strands to it. So obviously I have the membership, and within the membership there is live support, so calls and calls and sessions where we meet up sort of on Zoom, and those are sort of scheduled through the Substack where people can register for them and get the links and all that jazz. But there's also resources, so people can access lists of post ideas, so very practical stuff, or tutorials. So the kind of the how is what lives in the membership. And what I tend to put out to all of my subscribers is the what, and with a little bit of the how. And the reason why I've split it out that way is because some people will take the what and run with it. They can see straight away how it applies to them and their work, and they will run with it. Whereas other people, they just sort of say, actually, what I really want is sort of have my hand held a little bit more through the process. So that's when they come into the membership, and I keep that kind of more detailed, into the weeds tutorials and explanations in the membership, where I can give people more attention, basically, and more personalized advice. So I can, we can take an idea and really sort of go, okay, this is how it applies to you, or have you thought of doing it this way? I do a weekly check-in where people can sort of say, oh, I want to do this kind of thing. Have you got any ideas about how I might go about doing it? And then I can go back to them in the chat on Substack and sort of give them some suggestions. So that's how I divide it up. But I've also just started on Substack. It hasn't got a name at the moment. I'm just calling it For the Plot at the moment, which is a series of interviews with different professionals from publishing who I think have insights and expertise that my audience of writers and authors can benefit from, because obviously I can provide the Instagram expertise, but there's loads of things that I know nothing about. So I've just published a piece from some book cover designers. I've got another piece coming out at the end of the month from a book publicist. I've got somebody else who's lined up to do a piece about. I've had somebody on the podcast who talked about podcasting for writers and authors. So I've got this whole menu of advice from other people. So that's also going out to the free subscribers. So again, that's more of the what is possible, and let's look at people who are walking the talk. And then some people will just pull from that and be able to run with it, and then other people who feel like they need more support, there is the support there. So that's how my Substack works. And then I do use those kind of like themes and ideas and long form content from my Substack to inform what I then put onto my Instagram. I find that there are some people who are happy to hop platforms and be on more than one platform, but actually loads of people aren't. So there are lots of people on Instagram who are never going to come over to Substack. There are lots of people on Substack who don't like Instagram. So having the content in two places makes sense for my audience. I don't want anybody to miss out. I package it up differently for Instagram. So if I have a long form piece for Substack, that's perhaps 2, 3, maybe even 4 different Instagram posts. I won't try to shoehorn all of the information into one Instagram post, because the way people access information on Instagram is so different to how they engage with and access information on Substack. But one of the things I do want to do more of is bringing more of myself to my Substacks. At the moment, I do feel like that's lacking. I show up live in sessions for the membership, but a lot of what I put out is a little bit arm's length at the moment on my Substack. And actually, I think I would like to bring more of the personal energy that I have on my Instagram account to my Substack a little bit more explicitly. And I just think that's because I've been doing Instagram for so much longer that it is second nature to me to show up in particular ways on Instagram. And I'm still feeling my way with Substack, with your help, with your able assistance. So there's definite things I still want to do more of. There's so much more that I want to experiment with and see how it works out. Like, does it work? Do people want it? Are people interested? Because when I have told personal stories on Substack, they do tend to do really well. I wrote a piece earlier this year that was about the number of hours I work for the membership compared to the amount of money I make, which at the moment, which is something that I am really conscious of and working on, because I absolutely love running the membership, and the members are fantastic, and it also needs to work for me, in terms of the number of hours that I'm putting into it. So, but I published a piece about that difficult balance of realizing that I could earn more money if I put those hours into one-to-one work. But I sort of said, I've made a decision, like I want to run this membership. And so therefore I'm going to continue with it. But that piece yeah, we've got a really lovely response from people, sort of just like we were saying earlier, actually, just interested in the back end. Like none of them were people who were running memberships, but they were just like, oh, didn't realize, never thought of this. It's really interesting just to hear your experience of doing this. You know, it's so easy to look from the outside and think everything is just running, ticking along smoothly, and actually there aren't. There are these huge bumps in the road along the way. So I want to do more of that on my Substack. But I'm very happy with the combination, the way the two platforms interplay with one another. I really like. I think that, you know, you can reach two different audiences that are still totally relevant to your work by combining the two platforms, while not completely overwhelming yourself with extra work, because you can use your Substack focus to pull down from to create Instagram posts, or if you prefer to work the other way around and combine Instagram posts to create a Substack piece, you can also do that as well. So I do really like the way the two platforms interplay with each other.
Yeah, I think for me, what's been really interesting is to have this long form voice play out the way
Mm.
that it wants to play out, and then to circle back into like, how do I make this digestible? Or like you say, split
Mm.
it across 4 posts. I watched a little video that you did, and I think it might have been part of the membership, or it was like a free 7 days, or something happened anyway, and you were like working in an Excel spreadsheet and like chopping up the copy, and
Yeah, that's right.
I was mind blown. I was like, oh, right, we're like
Yeah.
literally chopping into the copy, making it more succinct, like thinking about attention spans. The carousels that I've put copy over the last few months have done well, especially if I put music on them. And I don't always, because I don't always have the app on my phone, and I'll post from the desktop, and you can't access music from the desktop anyway. It is really interesting to just think about how we're holding people in snippets of story and what we're asking them to do, and if we're asking them
Mm.
to come over. I wanted to just touch on ManyChat as well, because I've
Mm.
been using the pro version for a little while now, which has felt really cool, like a fun little assistant that delivers all my links. And then now when I get a new follower, it'll send them my Substack class for free. So you know, if they're not interested and they're not about that, they sort of get a bit like, oh well, maybe this person isn't for me at all. And it's a bit hit and miss with the sort of spam accounts, because I realize that I've obviously like DM'd them with this ManyChat link, and then I've got to go in and block them. But whatever, it is helpful, I feel like, to have that like straight away, that interaction, because what it's felt
Mhm.
like for me is that they don't just get lost in the sea of things. There's actually like a point of introduction. So that's been
Mm.
really good. I wanted to know if you use it, if you like it, if the authors that you work with use it, what you think of it.
So I haven't used it.
Hmm.
Um, Partly, mostly, this is just a very personal thing. Like, I don't have a view. I think it can be really great, like you say, for getting people into your sort of into your ecosystem more quickly. I, though, on a totally personal perspective, I don't like it when I'm on the receiving end of
One of
ManyChat.
those, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't really want to use something that I don't like, and I can
Mm,
totally see its strengths. So I'm totally happy for other people to use it. I'm just like, yeah, crack on.
mm,
The other thing is, though, I think for a lot of my audience who are authors and writers, that I very often say to them, if you get somebody who follows your account, not to use ManyChat up front, because there is a I feel like that when somebody follows an account that is clearly a business, it's a different kind of transaction in terms of time
mm, mhm.
and trust and that kind of thing. Whereas when somebody follows an account that is a writer's account, um, I'm not sure how people would feel about receiving a link straight away to buy a book, for example. And this person sort of thinks,
Yeah.
well, hang on a minute, like I don't know if I even want your book yet. Like I don't know. That's not why I've followed your account. Whereas if you warm them up and then use the ManyChat in a promotional post. So what I usually say to people is like, your promotional posts that are just there to sort of basically advertise your book should
Mm,
be a maximum of 25% of your content. So a maximum of every 4 posts.
got you.
And so on those posts, you can say specifically to people to comment something, to receive a link, to make it easier for them to just smooth out some of that friction in
Mm,
that journey, because Instagram the biggest weakness I think on Instagram is the fact that you cannot put live links on your posts. You can only put them on stories, or you can have them in your bio, or you can have them on paid for ads, but you can't have them on your post unless you use an Instagram shop, which is possible for indie writers, but not possible for traditionally published writers. So that's one way around that issue of wanting to remove the friction. Because obviously, if you were kind of like posting about your book and then they've got to go back to your bio and click on a link and then go out of Instagram, that journey for Instagram users is quite a clunky one, and it is
Yeah.
going to eat into the number of people who take that step, even if they fully intend to buy your book. So the ManyChat function, I think, can be really useful to add onto those, specifically those kinds of posts. But on your other kinds of posts, you might think, actually, the job of these posts is to build that trust and build that credibility. And I don't want to turn it into a transaction. Therefore, I just want it to be about connection. Therefore, I'm not going to use ManyChat at that stage and
Yeah.
use it further down the funnel instead. A funnel,
Yeah.
horrible
Yeah.
marketing word.
No, I get
But
it though.
yeah,
I get it. And I think you're right. Like we've always got to take it back to the human experience and how
yeah,
people feel. And I definitely felt that way about those links being delivered to start with. And I think now I've just got used to it. So there's
yeah.
definitely like just something that happens with the way that digital landscapes shift, change.
Mhm.
You know, we use them
And
in different ways, we accept different things
yeah,
about them. And I do
that's
think
it.
because it is me, but it is also my business. And sometimes I feel like when it's you on your Instagram and you're only one person, it can get quite overwhelming. You know, if I've had multiple DMs to get back to, and then I've got my email inbox, then I've got my Substack memberships to look after,
Yeah,
you definitely very quickly hit a capacity with being in all the online places. So being
yeah.
able to kind of go, okay, like that's sort of taken
Streamline.
care of with
Yeah,
over there, and then I'm going to do this over here. And I delete my apps Friday through Sunday as well. I put them back on my phone, usually on a Sunday evening, sometimes not till a Monday. But that really helps as well. I still think like we're in this place, especially as, well, I'm an elder millennial, so I've just been using the internet like for the whole time. And I do feel like there's been some breaking points in that timeline for me where I've been a bit like, this is just not sustainable. This is just bananas. Like, how many one
hmm,
person, having all of this electricity come through my
yeah.
systems and all of these different funnels and routes and different things. So, yeah, there is definitely a way with taking a step back, feeling more strategic, understanding that they are individual relationships, but there are things that we can do to kind of go, okay, that's the individual relationship, but then this is something that I know will be really helpful and
Mm.
useful for my audience. So I'll put it out as a post, I'll put
And
it out as a, yeah.
I do think like just trusting that your audience is having a particular experience of the internet beyond you that is
Yeah,
changing all the time, and like you said, that people very quickly get used to particular kinds of interactions.
yeah.
So if you are, you're sort of think, actually, I don't mind when I receive a many chat
Mm,
invitation or whatever, so
mhm.
like I'm just going to trust that my people also won't mind, and if they do mind, maybe they're not my people. Like kind
Yeah,
of having
yeah.
that ability to sort of not take it personally when a business decision or a decision that's for your own sanity
Mm,
is not liked by somebody else. That is
yeah,
okay. Like they are
yeah,
entitled to not like it.
yeah.
And you are entitled to still do it because
It's
it
true.
benefits you. Like I think a
Mm,
lot of this comes down to um, sort of having the or giving ourselves the permission to make decisions that work for us.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's it. And that could be different in one season to another
Yes.
season if
Yeah.
we've grown or if we've added in a Substack to the mix or a podcast or whatever we're doing. Things shift and change,
Yeah.
don't they?
And they should. They
Yeah.
should. Like dial it up, dial it down, have
Hmm.
breaks,
Yeah.
intentional, pre-planned breaks, put them in the
Mm.
diary. You're off on holiday, you know that your kids are off school, put it in the diary. You're not going to show up on
Hmm.
Instagram that week or anywhere else, whatever it might be.
Mm.
And because these platforms, they want to dictate our lives, but they have to fit around our lives.
Yeah.
And they will dictate our lives if we let them, because that
Yeah.
is what they are created to do.
Yeah.
So, like sort of holding firm to our collective humanity and saying, no, I have a life. So
I'm gonna live it
I'm not doing
outside of
these
that.
things that you're making
Yeah.
me feel like I should do,
Mm,
because I have a life to live.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really important.
Definitely. I'm going to ask you one last question, Nicola, because I know this comes up so much and people are so curious about it all. So I'll be really interested in your experience. Some people will teach the size of the platform for a book deal doesn't matter. Other people will
Mhm.
say it does, and it needs to be at
Mm,
least this amount. And it's different across fiction and non-fiction. It's different for the UK to international to America. What
yeah.
is your experience of all of that? And if somebody is genuinely wanting to grow their
Mhm.
Instagram platform so it bolsters their book proposal, where should they start? What should they do? Obviously,
Mm,
they can come and see you, but like it feels like life or death to them sometimes that they need to
yeah.
get X number of followers because
Yeah.
that's what a publisher's looking for. Now,
Yeah.
in this phase that we're in, so November 2025, I know that some publishers are looking at Substack stats and they're interested in Substack stats. If we'd have podcasted 2 years ago, that wouldn't have been the
No.
case. So there's a kind of say on the combined
Yeah.
effort of us putting across all of the different platforms,
Mm,
and there's something where it's nuanced, I guess is the answer from what I'm hearing, but I'd love your
yeah.
experience on any of that.
Well, before I answer, are they looking at subscriber numbers, or are they digging any deeper than that?
Yeah, so subscriber numbers, but also within the book proposal, obviously people are putting more statistics. Like if they've
Yeah.
got statistics for a global audience, which we do have on
Mhm.
Substack, and we can get to some of that in Instagram, we can get to like gender breakdown and different things, can't we? So like
Yeah.
I've not written a book proposal, so I hold my hands up, I've got no idea really, but just the bits that I hear, it's the breakdown of it all. So
Mm,
people really know their online audiences now, so they can say that quite confidently in a book proposal.
yeah.
Whereas, a few years ago, that might have been more difficult to kind of break that down. Also,
Yeah.
we've got a different attention span when it comes to long form podcast listeners. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like for like, is it? It's like 10,000 Instagram followers in terms of engagement might be the same as, and I'm totally plucking this from thin air, 2,500 Substack subscribers with a 50% open rate. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The type of engagement is really important, I think. But I don't know. This is perhaps going to sound a bit mean, and I do apologize to any publishing professionals out there who are listening, because I don't mean this as individuals. I mean this as an industry. Publishing is the most dysfunctional industry. I mean, I've not worked in very many. Like I've worked in education, and I've worked in retail, and publishing is a creature unlike any other, from what I can gather, and it plays to completely different rules. So when it comes to the fixation on platform that publishers has, it makes sense in many respects. This isn't very encouraging for lots of writers, but it makes sense because, of course, they it's a commercial enterprise, and they want to know that they can sell a book. And one of the ways in which they can feel confident, more confident, that they're going to sell a book is if you have a platform. But a platform can be many different things. You might be a journalist who is well known for writing on a particular subject matter. You might have a podcast that has a certain number of downloads, or a newsletter subscriber list, not just Substack, but newsletter anywhere, a good sized subscriber list in a newsletter, or social media audiences. Now, when it comes to social media audiences, it is my understanding, in my experience, that it doesn't matter for fiction writers. Where I tend to see people talking about it mattering for fiction writers is in the States. It doesn't ever seem to be part of the equation in the UK, but occasionally I do get told by people in America that, oh no, I've been told as a novelist that I need to have this number of Instagram followers, or wherever the followers are. In the UK, nobody's ever told me that it's made a difference to their fiction book deals. Non-fiction, however, is completely different, and it actually varies from niche to niche. I had a client tell me that she was writing a kind of cookbook hybrid memoir type book, and she had been told that she needed 100,000 Instagram followers to make
Wow.
that an attractive proposition to a publisher. I've had memoirists who are told that they need 3,000 Instagram followers to
Mm.
make their memoir an attractive proposition
So
to
more
a
like
publisher.
the social proof, just that you can
Yeah, the
actually
social
speak
proof.
to an audience. Yeah.
And then anything in between for sort of expertise-led nonfiction books. So,
Mm.
like, how long is a piece of string? Is the short
Hmm.
answer.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I know, I am confident that if you're in the UK and you are a novelist, you don't need to be thinking about the size of your social media platform until it comes to you've got your book deal and you're now thinking about sales, and
Hmm.
you want to make sure that your book is not launched into a void,
Mm.
because so many publishers don't give, especially debut writers, but like lots of mid-list writers as well,
Mm.
they don't get very much marketing support at all. And again, I want to stress that this is not a criticism of the individuals who work within the marketing departments of publishers, who I know love books, are passionate about books, want to do everything they possibly can to get books out into their readers' hands. But the volume of books that is now being published is so enormous, and the resources they are being given to market those books are so stretched, and very often are plugged into a very small number of titles that they are confident are going to deliver a return. And
Mm.
it is the sales of those titles that then enables smaller books to be published, basically, because the publishers are not making money on the books that get much lower sales numbers. So lots and lots of authors, for that reason, find themselves sort of being cut loose to do a lot of the legwork for themselves. And at the point where your book is about to be released into the world, and you suddenly find out that your marketing department don't have the resources to support you, how are you? I always think, like, how are you going to feel just letting your book go out into the world and potentially not reach very many of its readers?
Mm.
And this, showing up on social media, obviously I am biased, so you can take this with a pinch of salt, or you can take it on board. It's up to everybody how you want to receive this. But when you are an author, as a traditionally published author, one of the very parts, the smallest parts of the process that you actually can control is your marketing.
Mm.
So much of it, once you sign that book deal, is out of your hands. And I know from working with lots of writers and authors, that very often comes as quite a big shock, and it's not a terribly nice experience always. And they're very happy to have their books out in the world, but it's a bit of a tainted situation very often. Lots of authors report feeling abandoned by their publishers at the point at which their books are released. And so taking ownership and self-driving your marketing
Mm.
via social media, because it is one of the most accessible forms of marketing, is something that most authors can do.
Mhm.
So, like, in terms of numbers, like, how long is a piece of string? And what I want people to bear in mind is that it's not just about reaching a magic number of followers. It's about I talk about it in terms of mushrooms and kites, which perhaps is going to sound a bit bonkers. I
I
do have
can't
a
wait.
piece
I'm
on
like
my
leaning in.
Substack. I do have a piece on my Substack that explains this in a bit more detail. So if this sounds completely insane to anybody, then I will send the link to Claire so she can share the link to that essay, where you will, hopefully it will make a bit more sense. But basically, the way publishers treat social media is as if it's about flying kites. So it's about getting your kite up as high in the sky so as many people see it as possible. And that is this idea that you have a huge number of followers to sort of wave your book around in front of. The way I think of it, and the way that I think it works way better for most writers and authors who don't have a huge social media platform, is to think of it much more like a mushrooms. So networks of fungi that go underground and then they pop up in other unexpected places. So you use your Instagram account to gather around you a core group of people who are deeply invested in the work that you do. They like you. They've bought into you and your story. They're going to buy any book that you write just because they like you. They are going to talk about your book. They're going to amplify it both in the real world, perhaps with their book groups or their local library or their local bookshop, or they're going to post about it online for you. They're going to interact with every single one of your Instagram posts so that that sends messages to the signals to the algorithms to push those posts out further. They're going to share your Instagram posts to their stories. They're going to repost your Instagram posts using that really funky new little button that Instagram has added in there. They're going to do all of that because they want to do everything they can to support you in reaching your readers. And that is how. So if you get 1,000, I mean, Kevin Kelly, if any of you have ever come across 1,000, is it 1,000 True Fans
Thousand True
theory?
Fans. It comes up a lot, actually, Nicola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of along those lines. Like those are the people, if you think about your 1,000 True Fans, but it doesn't die with them. You know, you're not going to, let's say you sell a copy of the book to every one of those 1,000 people. It doesn't die with them because they then will speak to their networks and push it out even further. And that is my much preferred way of encouraging people to use social media. Obviously, to want to gather people around what you do, because that is an essential part of the puzzle, but also to be thinking about it in terms of the network effect, so that you're sorry, I'm sorry, Claire. I'm really, really sorry. This is a really urgent call that I just need my husband
Yeah.
to take. I'm really
No,
sorry.
no probs. I'll just pause. There we There we go, we're back. Yeah, so the network of it all, and that's beautiful. And I think that translates so well to Substack as well, in the way
Yeah,
that we can use Substack notes, but we also have our longer form content, our communities, and you definitely have that as well. I'll wrap us up there, Nicola. It's been so gorgeous to spend time with you. I could talk to you all afternoon. I think we need to have some sort of little retreat, to be honest. That would be nice for us. If people want to connect with you on Instagram or Substack,
mhm.
can you just share your links? And I'll
Yeah.
do that in the copy below as well, but just so people have heard it, that would be lovely.
Yeah, so on Substack, you can find me by searching Too Much by Nicola Washington. And within that is the membership, which is Too Much Instagram. And then on Instagram, my handle is too much underscore. No, it isn't. It's too much underscore social on Instagram. Gosh, get that right. I need to get that right.
Beautiful. I do that. I think because we've had to kind of replicate ourselves across multiple platforms. I've got
Yeah.
creativelyconscious.uk, I've got Creatively Conscious, I've got Spark. There's so many. Gorgeous. Well, thank you so much for your generous shares and expertise. It's been beautiful to spend this time with you. And I know over the next week I'm going to have so many little light bulbs. I really appreciate spending this time with you, and I know our audience will as well. Thanks again,
Thanks so
Nicola.
much. Thanks,
Take
Claire.
care. Bye.
Bye.